You hear me say this a lot. Learning to speak English is simple if you delete this one word out of your dictionary. Difficult. Because ultimately, doing what feels hard, and hard has different degrees, it doesn't have to be impossible, will ultimately lead to an easier life, which is what everybody wants. Many times, unfortunately, content creators, influencers, propagate the fact that pronunciation or learning English is difficult.
6 very difficult words in English.
And you pronounce these super hard words.
This is why British English is so difficult.
And I believe to my core, and this is what I start every single coaching session with my students, that nothing is ever difficult. When you do something you haven't done before, you're getting stronger, more powerful, and build confidence. So why not do what feels hard? And if you want to get ahead of 90% of English students who aren't going to get the jobs they want, move to their dream country, pass their exams because they are drowning in complaining, negativity, insecurities, watch this video until the end to find out how learning to speak English isn't actually that hard if you know what to focus on, how to access the confidence within you, and as long as you don't focus on the benefits of today, but on the benefits of what you will get, the life of freedom, opportunities, after having done what feels uncomfortable. This is what we call delayed gratification. And if you stay until the very end of the video, in the last point, I'm going to share with you the simplest way to start building up your confidence in speaking English, whatever level of fluency you're currently at. I spent my entire childhood watching my parents. They were both working in factories. My mum was working in a factory where they were preparing cables for Suzuki cars, and my dad was simply fixing things for a mine initially. And sometimes they were working for 8-12 hours a day in 3 shifts. And I talk more about how that, watching my parents work hard, actually helped me build my confidence, along with so many other things that I experienced in a 60+ page ebook that I created. You can check this out, download this in the description below. But my parents still found the energy to show up for their kids, play with them, watch TV with them, play board games with them. So I was so inspired by watching them build up their life from almost nothing just because they did the hard work and focused on the benefits of doing what feels hard, which is ultimately, I think, was the reason I was able to build my business, learn to speak 5 languages fluently, and spend 11 years, almost 12, away from my home country, none of which has ever been easy, I can tell you that. In today's video, I'll be sharing with you the 3 things that will help you get ahead of 90% of English students, and the kind of thinking that helped me learn to speak English fluently and confidently by the age of 20, simply by looking at what difficult means differently from how most people look at it. Basically, from the perspective of your future self. Just close your eyes for a bit and imagine having the job you always dreamt of working in, the country of your dreams where you'll be living, having the best connections, best friendships you could ever wish for, sharing incredible conversations with other people who you could learn from, grow from as a person, just because you speak English fluently and have access to speaking to those people who don't speak your native language, and thinking you have access to all of that because you showed up in times learning to speak English felt difficult and uncomfortable. And what is more difficult? Every time someone comes to me and says, oh, but speaking English is so difficult, I'm like, is it more difficult to learn to speak English so we can get access to a lifetime of opportunities and life skills like discipline, critical thinking, creativity, besides having a higher salary and more opportunities? Or is it more difficult not to speak English and miss out on a ton of life opportunities because you don't speak the language the world speaks? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Chubby. I'm an English fluency learning and language anxiety coach, and this is a channel for serious English learners, entrepreneurs, ambitious professionals, academics, students who want to learn how to speak English way more fluently, naturally, and confidently, and how to make vocabulary more memorable through listening and spoken interaction. And if this is your first time watching and you haven't subscribed yet, if these are topics you'd like to find out more about so you can start building your confidence, you can subscribe, hit the bell so you can get notified every time I post a new video. Doing difficult things is all about understanding psychology. I've been reading psychology books for the last few years, and this is currently the book that I'm reading. You can see I've already highlighted a couple of things here. This is called behave. It's pretty advanced, so despite having proficient level of English, I find it really hard to read because there are so many neuroscience related, biology related words that I really have to think about and understand. But one thing I'm already learning from this is that humans are ultimately wired to avoid pain and move towards pleasure, which is the reason why you see millions of people around the world, teenagers, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, spending hours scrolling on their phones, watching Netflix, swiping and tapping on language learning apps, but still struggle to have a conversation in English with confidence. And I have nothing against social media. I think it's an incredible tool if you know how to use it, which is unfortunately the minority of people, to make connections, whether it's in the comments, through videos, stories, messages. But most struggling English students unfortunately use social media to hide away from difficult situations and stay in their comfort zone. And when someone doesn't get challenged, doesn't get frustrated, confused for just a little bit, so they could grow and improve, how could they expect to improve their fluency or conversation skills? Most of these struggling English students who have incredible potential to build a better, richer, more fulfilled life for themselves with better career opportunities and other life opportunities, is that they are victims of probably the biggest crisis in today's society, thanks to all the technology and everything we can get so quickly, which is instant gratification. They kind of create a sense of progress, the illusion of learning by scrolling through a bunch of videos, following teachers, studying grammar, whether it's from books or online, and they're getting a lot of dopamine hit because they are doing something that they are having fun with. But the reality is, because of these language learning apps or social media posts, videos, books, podcasts, even courses, don't challenge them, what actually shows how much progress someone has made in learning English is eventually how fluently, effectively, and confidently they communicate. And more often than not, students, after years of studying grammar, memorizing lists of words, even after taking grammar courses or lessons with native speaker teachers, they still struggle to remember vocabulary, understand fast English speakers, and speak confidently in conversations with other people. And none of my students were able to improve because they did what felt easy, because that only ends up not building our skills, and that's what leads to loads of insecurities, complaining, and negativity. My goal is to make what feels hard easier so they can actually do it and then build a better life. Everything has pros and cons. Struggling English students might feel embarrassed, they might feel like they are out of control, they can't control the other person, they can't control the topic of the conversation or how difficult the vocabulary is. They might feel uncomfortable and they might pay so much attention to other people's judgment on what mistakes they make. And many times they basically feel like they're not good enough. These struggling English students forget the benefits of doing what feels difficult, which is what every effective English communicator I've ever taught started to shift their attention to. If you ask me, the benefits of doing something that feels a bit hard, that feels a bit challenging and frustrating, far outweigh these cons, including the joy of accomplishment, feeling like I can be proud of myself because I've done something I couldn't do before, having 1% more confidence, getting 1% closer to my goals, passing that interview, moving to that dream country of mine, and of course, an improved level of fluency. In our modern world, it's super easy for us to fall into the trap of doing things that create this instant gratification, where we feel like we are doing things that feel easy and fun and entertaining. I don't know about you, but how accomplished do you feel after scrolling on your phone for hours or watching a bunch of videos, going through a few chapters of a grammar book or a vocabulary book, or watching a bunch of grammar videos? If you're anything like me, you immediately realize how much time you've wasted. You beat yourself up about not doing the work. What helped me flip the switch so I don't end up wasting all my time just overthinking, procrastinating, doing things that don't actually help me move one step closer to my fluency was reverse engineering it. Thinking about my future, not wanting to make my future self feel that regret of I just wasted my time. Be willing to do something that makes me a bit uncomfortable so I can feel proud of myself and have that sense of achievement that eventually fuels my motivation to keep going. Building fluency requires, and one of the reasons a lot of struggling English students aren't making much progress is because they don't focus on tapping into these, focus, consistency, courage, and effort. So we can keep learning, improving, growing from all those moments we do decide to step outside our comfort zone, which is what systems ultimately help my students with. We want to make it easier for us to do what feels hard, so we don't end up procrastinating for another 2-3 years. And I talk about 3 of the most effective systems that get anyone from any level of fluency to become fluent and confident English communicators in this video. And if you feel like you still don't have the fluency or the confidence to walk into a conversation and then express yourself the best way you can, it's probably because you haven't taken an honest look at yourself, at what you do in your 24 hours. Build and maintain the habits of doing activities that actually build your fluency and confidence. Anything that feels difficult only feels difficult because it's not part of your habits. And no, I'm not talking about activities like downloading a bunch of language learning apps or shadowing through a video, but eventually practicing what you want to get better at, which is speaking fluently and having conversations with confidence. The second way I became a powerful English learner is by focusing on high performance skills. When people spend so much of their time worried about mistakes, they hold themselves back. They are not really bringing the best out of themselves. And this is what I ultimately focus on in every single one of my classes. I want people to come to my classes where they have the opportunity, feel safe enough, encouraged and inspired enough to bring the best out of the short amount of time they have to spend on learning to speak English. Just a bit more was the slogan I kept telling myself. When I started to watch series like Grey's Anatomy, The Vampire Diaries, or Prison Break at that time, I slowly started to take off the subtitles because I wanted to understand what people are saying without actually reading the subtitles. In real life conversations, there are no subtitles, and a lot of struggling English students have difficulties understanding fast English speakers, especially when native speakers roll everything together because they haven't learned English through listening. And whenever I got frustrated, like, oh, I don't really understand what they are saying, my ears were not catching up with the speed the characters were speaking, all I told myself was just keep doing it a little bit more. And those 5 extra minutes that I spent keeping on listening when I started to get tired, exhausted, frustrated, eventually added up, which helped me get ahead of 90% of English students. And you can apply the same thing whenever you practice, whether you record yourself, you practice speaking, shadowing, listening, reviewing vocabulary, just a bit more. Because once you already started, it's easier to continue. So if you've already been doing fluency building activities, you could just do it for another 5 or 10 minutes to keep pushing, to keep bringing the best out of the limited amount of time you can spend learning English. And if you're wondering how my students are able to understand fast English and learn to listen to English more naturally, you can check out this video where I even mention a couple of activities that you can start implementing so you can improve your listening skills. And last but not least, and this is what ultimately helps everyone build their fluency from the ground up, gradually, taking courageous action. You have the power to decide to take courage for your life, for your future, for your freedom, for your opportunities in life, in every minute of your life. What holds so many struggling English students back, and the reason so many of them spend 3, 5, sometimes 10 years studying English without results with their confidence, is because their expectations are way too high. You want to remember everything, understand everything, and be able to speak spontaneously like they do in their native language, and we need to spend a lot of time struggling to put sentences together, getting frustrated about not understanding everything or not remembering every single word until we can get to that point. So I understand how uncomfortable it feels at the beginning, but aiming at speaking English perfectly where you remember all the vocabulary without doing the consistent practice is like expecting to climb to the top of a cliff from the bottom. So because most of them are so afraid of messing up or freezing up in the middle of a conversation, they might have been made fun of, they might even have had bad experience back in school where their teachers made them feel ashamed of the mistakes they made. They decide not to do it, even if they know that it's through making mistakes and paying attention to the feedback we get on them, how we learn and improve. But the truth is, your mind keeps listening in every single second of your life. So if you do decide not to speak because of your unrealistic expectations, What do you think you're teaching yourself? That you cannot be trusted. And self-trust is ultimately where confidence comes from. It doesn't come from how many words we know, how advanced our grammar is, or how native our accent is. It comes from how much we can trust ourselves in doing hard, uncomfortable shit. Building that self-trust, and this is something I teach to every one of my students from the first day they join our community. And the reason they're making so much progress within like the first 3 to 6 months of spending time with us is the same thing you would do if you want to climb to the top of a cliff from the bottom. What would you do? You would probably get a ladder, start carving some steps out of the rock and climb up one step at a time. So gaining confidence in speaking English works exactly the same way. This is why Nike's slogan, "Just do it," is so important to start implementing. Take the action. Not trying to focus on how perfectly you speak, but trying to practice having a conversation at your current level of fluency. Whenever we practice with my students, and I teach people at pre-intermediate, intermediate level, but also pre-advanced, upper intermediate, or advanced level as well. And every level has its own communication skills. And I talk about this more in this video if you'd like to look for some advice. With pre-intermediate students, we practice how to talk about likes or dislikes, so we practice sentences like "I'm not keen on doing something" or "XYZ isn't my cup of tea." But with people who are at an upper intermediate or a pre-advanced level, we might be practicing how to describe processes, how to invite other people into a conversation, how to interrupt, or how to manage a conversation at work. So as you keep saying yes to feeling uncomfortable, whether it's only for 5 minutes of a conversation or an hour-long conversation, at your current level of English, you'll be teaching yourself that you can trust yourself in doing hard shit. And when you make that choice of putting that phone away or hiding behind your textbook, passively watching Netflix in the evening where you don't remember any of the vocabulary you are learning, and choose to have conversations, recording yourself, practicing speaking, the joy, the pleasure of accomplishment, the fact that you can be proud of yourself for doing something you didn't think you could do is what eventually is going to fuel you to keep going. And that's what we call motivation, which comes after taking courageous action. After watching this video, you have a choice every single day. You either choose to do what most people do what feels easy, what feels fun all the time, and then ending up with a life of insecurities, complaining, and negativity, regretting not making time or energy for doing things you promised yourself to do, or you can choose to think how 10% of English students think, the ones who actually get to high levels of fluency, who can speak English fluently and confidently, and choose to do one small but challenging thing so they can build an easier, better, richer, more fulfilled life because they practiced discipline, showing up for themselves, and build self-trust with themselves, which is the definition of confidence. How will you be choosing today? Let me know in the comments. Also, did you find this video helpful? I'm always happy to talk about the mindset, the kind of thinking, the type of actions I've taken, and also the things I help my students with, so you can eventually be part of the 10% and build an amazing life for yourself because you speak English fluently.